You walked past it. 14 hours into a displacement. Rationing what's left in your bag, scanning the roadside for anything useful, and you walked past a vehicle that was holding 6 categories of survival material inside an unlocked shell. Not buried, not hidden. Sitting in a parking lot on a highway shoulder in a flooded neighborhood, right where someone left it when the engine died and the situation got worse. The car was never the problem. The car was the answer. Most people in grid down or displacement scenarios treat abandoned vehicles as obstacles or landmarks, reference points for distance, nothing more. That framing is a trained blindness, and it costs people in ways they never fully reconstruct after the fact. There are 6 things inside a dead car that change the calculus of the first 72 hours. Not metaphorically, materially, and the majority of people with preparedness training walk past every single one. You're following Hurricane Katrina in 2005. Over 350,000 vehicles were documented as abandoned across Louisiana and Mississippi. The Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality alone cataloged 195,000 in the first 3 months. In the 2010 Haiti earthquake, vehicle abandonment preceded acute food scarcity by an average of 4 to 6 days. That gap matters. In every large-scale displacement event on record, the resource window, the period during which abandoned vehicles remain unsearched and intact, opens before conditions become critical. The window closes when the situation normalizes or when it deteriorates past the point of organized recovery. What happens in between is largely a function of whether people know what they're looking at. Nadia was moving along a 2-lane state road on foot. 17 hours after a regional grid failure knocked out power and fuel infrastructure across 4 counties, she passed 17 vehicles in 4 miles. She was looking for food, for water, for anything clearly labeled as useful. She needed fire. She needed light. She passed all 17. Every one of those vehicles was carrying fuel. Not in a container, not in a visible tank, just in the system that was there before the engine stopped. A dead car is not an empty car. The tank may be low, but residual gasoline in a sealed system doesn't evaporate on a weekly timeline. Pump-grade gasoline retains ignition utility for fire starting for 30 to 60 days before oxidation meaningfully degrades its performance, and even degraded fuel burns. More importantly, every vehicle manufactured in the past 4 decades carries brake fluid in a reservoir under the hood, accessible without tools, visible within seconds of opening the hood. Brake fluid has a flash point between 230 and 375 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on formulation. It burns, it sustains flame, and it is almost never considered by anyone who didn't specifically train for it. Locate the fuel door. Siphon using any hose 18 inches or longer. A strip of rubber door seal works in the absence of dedicated tubing. Open the hood and identify the brake fluid reservoir, which is always labeled and always translucent. Use both. And do not confuse brake fluid with coolant. Coolant is typically green or orange and will not ignite reliably. The engine stopped. The liquids inside it did not stop being flammable. A dead car and a dead battery are not the same failure, and that distinction is worth more than almost anything else on this list. Derek had a hand-crank emergency radio, 2 devices with dead batteries, and a clear need for light past sundown. On the shoulder beside him sat a sedan that hadn't moved in 3 days. He assumed the battery was dead because the car was dead. He kept walking. Standard automotive lead-acid batteries lose charge through self-discharge at a rate of roughly 3 to 5% per month under normal conditions. A battery that was healthy before the vehicle was abandoned can retain 60 to 80% capacity 3 weeks later. Enough to power a 5-watt LED lamp for over 30 hours or to charge small devices repeatedly through a simple USB adapter pulled from the dash. The vehicle dying does not mean the battery failed. Often it means the alternator failed, or the fuel system failed, or the driver made a decision to abandon rather than repair. Find the battery. It is under the hood in 90% of passenger vehicles, in the trunk in some German-manufactured models, under the rear seat in a small number of others. Access the terminals with any conductive wire. Jumper cables, if present in the vehicle, are already there for this purpose. Protect your eyes from terminal arcing. Use the charge before sustained cold temperatures reduce capacity further. The car stopped. The stored electricity did not stop being electricity. Carla was on day 3 of a solo displacement on a rural highway. She needed to signal. She had no mirror, no reflective panel, nothing in her kit designed for visual signaling. She could see 4 vehicles from where she stood. She kept walking. Every passenger vehicle contains a minimum of 2 exterior side view mirrors, 1 interior rear view mirror, and multiple glass panels. The windshield alone has a surface area of roughly 8 to 12 square feet of light refractive material. The side view mirror, removed from its housing by hand or with a rock against the mount, produces a directional signal visible at over 1 mile in direct sunlight. The United States Air Force Survival Manual rates an improvised signal mirror as the highest yield passive signaling tool available under 1 pound of carry weight. The physics don't change because the car is broken. Remove the side view mirror. Angle it toward known flight corridors, elevated terrain with line of sight, or active road intersections. Use the reflection off a white interior surface, a sun visor, a door panel to calibrate the aim angle before committing to a position. Break the windshield if larger surface area serves the signal need. The mirror was mounted to a dead car. It was never part of the car. It was always just a mirror. The Okonkwo family, Marcus, Priya, and their 2 children, made it to the shoulder of the highway at dusk with 1 blanket and the reasonable assumption that a minivan that wouldn't start was useless to them. Temperature dropped 11 degrees overnight. They slept cold. Ground conduction accounts for 60 to 70% of heat loss in improvised outdoor sleep. More than wind exposure, more than inadequate top cover. Any barrier between a sleeping body and the ground reduces that loss faster than adding layers above. Automotive seating foam in vehicles manufactured after 2000 is predominantly closed cell. The same foam class used in entry-level camping sleeping pads. It compresses under weight, but it insulates. A rear seat cushion removed and laid flat on the ground beneath a sleeping person changes the thermal equation of that night in a measurable way. Remove the rear seat cushions and use them as ground barriers. Strip the trunk liner, a flat sheet of composite material, if rain is incoming because it sheds water and doubles as a windbreak. Pull the seat belts from their housings. They are woven nylon rated for thousands of pounds of load and function as lashing cord, tourniquet backing, or ridgeline for improvised overhead cover. The cold floor was the threat. The solution was unlocked and 30 feet away, and no one reached for it. Tomas had containers. He did not have a consistent water source. It had rained the previous night, not heavily, half an inch over 4 hours. He moved on at first light without checking a single vehicle. A standard passenger vehicle roof panel has a surface area of 18 to 24 square feet. At half an inch of rainfall, that surface collects between 4 and 5 liters of water. Impure, but present. Water pooled on a horizontal surface begins microbial multiplication within 24 hours in warm ambient conditions, which means the collection and treatment window after rain is tight but real. The trunk of an open vehicle, angled slightly by flat tires or road camber, holds runoff in a sealed floor cavity. The windshield washer fluid reservoir carries 1 to 2 liters of liquid, not potable. Not for drinking, but usable for wound irrigation when sterile options are absent, because the base is distilled water with additive concentrations that are irritating but not acutely toxic on skin contact. Channel roof runoff using a strip of rubber door seal or a section of plastic trim into any container. Treat collected water with iodine tablets or sustained boiling before drinking. Check the washer reservoir and label it non-potable before storing it. The rain fell on every surface equally. The car held it longer than the ground did because the car was designed to keep water out, which means it was also designed accidentally to keep water in. Now stop for a moment and look at the pattern behind everything covered so far. None of these items were placed in vehicles for survival purposes. The foam wasn't there because someone anticipated a displacement event. The battery wasn't there as a backup power source. The brake fluid wasn't there as fire fuel. These things exist in vehicles because of engineering decisions made for entirely different reason. Comfort, regulation, performance, safety. They are survival resources by accident. Preparedness culture spends the majority of its energy teaching people to carry things. It spends almost none teaching people to read the landscape they're already moving through. If the first 72 hours of a serious displacement event are the highest risk window, and the data from Katrina, or from the 2011 Tohoku displacement, from the 2018 Camp Fire evacuation corridors all confirm that they are, then the question is not what you packed. The question is whether you can see what's already there. The last item on this list answers that question differently than the others. The last thing Renata needed from that dead Civic on the shoulder of Route 9 was a tool. She needed 4 walls and a door that closed. 18 hours of walking in deteriorating weather had pushed her past the threshold where she was making sound decisions that she had passed a viable water source an hour earlier. She had chosen a campsite with no wind protection. She was accelerating her pace instead of conserving output. She did not recognize any of this as cognitive collapse. She thought she was being efficient. Research from military SERE, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. Programs documents that subjects who rested in enclosed spaces recovered decision-making capacity measurably faster than those who rested in open-air environments, even when sleep duration was identical. Psychological enclosure, the perception of a defined boundary, reduces cortisol output and allows prefrontal function to begin restoring in ways that open exposure does not. A dead car provides this. 4 walls, a roof, seats that elevate your body off cold ground, a door that locks if the battery has any charge, or that braces shut with a seatbelt if it does not. Use the vehicle as a rest point before you strip it for materials. Sleep elevated on the seats rather than on the floor. Leave through a decision, a real one, made after 6 to 8 hours of enclosed rest, not through the momentum of panic or the false clarity of exhaustion. The most valuable thing in that car was never the battery or the mirror or the fuel. It was the 4 walls that gave your brain enough quiet to start working again. So here's what a dead car actually contains. It contains ignition fuel in the tank and brake fluid in the reservoir, both accessible without tools. It contains a battery that is probably not dead, only disconnected from a failed system, holding enough charge to provide light for days. It contains signal mirrors on every exterior door and glass panels that redirect sunlight at range. It contains ground insulation in the seat foam and structural material in the trunk liner and lashing cord in every seatbelt. It contains a water catch surface on every horizontal panel after any rainfall event. And it contains 4 walls that restore the one thing no kit can carry, a functioning mind. The person who has internalized this list in month 3 of a prolonged emergency is moving through the landscape differently. They stop at vehicles. They spend 4 minutes assessing, not walking past. They leave with fire capability, improved sleep insulation, and a signal tool they didn't carry in. The person who did not internalize this list is lighter on their feet and shorter on options. Memorize the 6 categories. Walk every vehicle you pass in a training context, parking lots, roadsides, anywhere, and run the mental checklist until it takes under 30 seconds. Stop treating dead cars as scenery. The road is already stocked. Most people just never learn to read it.